Deep in the Nevada desert, not far from Las Vegas, stands a huge mountain that the government has been very interested in for a long time. Yucca Mountain rises from the flat land around it like a guard keeping watch. Its rocky slopes hide many tunnels that go deep inside. Some people say these tunnels are home to strange things that science can't explain. In the 1980s, the government picked Yucca Mountain to store America's nuclear waste. This choice turned the quiet mountain into a hotly debated site. Workers dug huge tunnels and rooms into the mountain. They built them to safely hold dangerous materials for the next 10,000 years. But as they dug deeper, workers started to see and hear things they couldn't explain. The project was huge. They made a main tunnel shaped like a U that was 5 miles long. Many smaller tunnels branched off from it. At the busiest time, about 2,800 people worked inside the mountain. Most came for the good pay. None of them knew what strange things they would find underground. The first weird reports came in around 1994, 3 years after the Big Dig began. A night boss named Ray Mendez was doing his checks when he heard whispers coming from an empty part of the North Tunnel. He thought some workers had wandered off, so he followed the sounds deeper into the mountain. "I heard what sounded like people talking, but I couldn't make out the words," Mendez wrote in his report. "When I got closer, the whispers moved farther away. I followed them for about 15 minutes before I realized I had gone way past the areas we had dug out." The next morning, Mendez looked at the tunnel maps. He found out he had been in a section that was closed off 2 weeks earlier because the rocks weren't safe. There should have been a wall blocking that area, but somehow he had walked right through with no memory of seeing any wall. More reports came in soon after. Workers heard their names called from empty tunnels. Tools would vanish from one spot and show up in far-off parts of the tunnels that were hard to reach. But most often, people heard whispers. Some said it sounded like English played backward. Others thought it was a language no one knew. The engineers first said these were just weird sound effects that happen in tunnels. Sound acts strangely underground. It bounces off walls and can trick your ears. The special rock layers in Yucca Mountain could make sounds seem odd. But this answer couldn't explain what happened to the Baker 7 survey team in summer 1995. The 5 people on this team were mapping a new section about 1,400 feet underground. Their job was simple: study the rocks and find any cracks that might make it unsafe to store waste there. 4 hours into their work, they made a normal radio check with the surface. That was the last time anyone heard from them. When they didn't come back on time, a search team went looking. They found all the team's gear scattered on the tunnel floor. Notebooks were open with sentences that stopped midway. Coffee in cups was still warm, but all 5 people were gone. The official story said the team must have run into poison gas that made them run deeper into the tunnels, where they got lost. But no one ever found any gas. And even after a huge 3-week search with more than 200 people, the missing team was never found. The government kept this event secret, but rumors spread fast among the workers who were left. Some said search teams found weird marks carved into the walls near where the team was last seen, symbols that didn't match any known writing. Others said the team's notebooks had the same word written over and over on the last pages: listening. By 1997, so many strange things were happening that the bosses set up a secret system where workers could report weird events without being laughed at. This file was never shown to the public, but Douglas Keller, who used to run the site, later said it held over 400 different reports by the time the project lost funding in 2011. We had tough construction workers, scientists with fancy degrees, and military veterans all reporting things they couldn't explain. Keller said in a 2018 interview. These weren't people who made up stories. Something real was happening in those tunnels. One of the most believable stories came from Teresa Vasquez, who checked radiation levels at the site for 3 years. Vasquez didn't believe in ghosts and first thought her co-workers were just seeing things because of stress. That changed during a normal check in November 1998. Vasquez was testing a far part of the East Tunnel when her radiation meter started showing readings that made no sense. The numbers jumped from 0 to levels that should have killed her instantly. At the same time, the tunnel got so cold that ice formed on her tools. Then I heard them, she wrote later, the whispers. But this time, I could make out bits of what they said. They were saying numbers, maybe map points, and what sounded like dates far in the future. When I turned to leave, I saw shadows moving on the far wall, but they were moving on their own, not following any light. Vasquez's story might have been ignored like many others, except for one key fact: her radiation meters saved data. When experts checked it later, they found it really had recorded those impossible readings. Even stranger, the timestamps showed that while Vasquez thought she was there for about 8 minutes, the meter had been recording for over 3 hours. Around this same time, they found something that made them see the whole Yucca Mountain project differently. In 1999, researchers learned that the mountain and the land around it was sacred to many Native American tribes, especially the Western Shoshone and Paiute. Tribal elders said Yucca Mountain was a place where the wall between worlds was thin. In their stories, the mountain was both a doorway and a wall, keeping dangerous things trapped, while sometimes letting messengers pass through. Some stories warned people not to dig into the mountain, saying it would disturb those who speak from the other side of time. William Eagle Bear, a Shoshone elder who talked with the Department of Energy after these findings, was very worried about the digging. Our ancestors knew this place was special and dangerous, he said. They warned us in their stories about the voices in the mountain. Voices that could confuse a person so badly they would never find their way home. Now you've opened paths that should have stayed closed. The government scientists politely listened to these cultural views, but privately thought they didn't matter for storing nuclear waste. Yet, as more strange things kept happening, some started to wonder if the old warnings might be true. The scariest event happened in March 2002, when a stable part of the main tunnel had what reports called a localized time distortion. Security cameras show 2 workers doing a routine check when the tunnel behind them starts to waver, like when you look through heat rising from hot road. When they turn to look, both men freeze for 12 seconds before running away in terror. The camera keeps recording as the waviness spreads, making the video turn to static. When the picture comes back 3 minutes later, the tunnel looks normal except for a thin layer of dust on the floor. Tests later showed this dust was about 200 years older than the other dust around it. When asked what happened, both workers said they saw the tunnel change before their eyes. The modern concrete walls briefly turned into rough rock covered with strange symbols. Even scarier, they said they saw shadow figures coming toward them from the wavy area. Figures that had too many limbs, all moving wrong. By 2004, the weird stuff had grown beyond whispers and strange sights. Workers started reporting what they called time slips, short times when they would see a different version of the facility. Some found themselves in tunnels that weren't on any map. Others met workers they didn't know who would disappear when approached. A maintenance worker named Carlos Rivera wrote about walking into a storage room and finding it changed into what looked like a high-tech lab full of equipment like nothing I've ever seen, more advanced than anything we have. When he tried to touch one of the devices, everything suddenly went back to normal, and he was just standing in the regular storage room. These strange things weren't just happening deep in the mountain. The office buildings on the surface had problems too. Phones would ring with no one calling. Computers showed messages in strange writing before going back to normal. Several office workers quit after seeing their faces look decades older in bathroom mirrors, only to return to normal when they looked away. Maybe most scary were the dreams. By 2006, almost 40% of the Yucca Mountain workers said they had the same nightmare. They dreamed they were trapped in the tunnels, while whispers led them deeper towards something waiting in the dark. People who saw what was waiting would always wake up, scared but couldn't remember what they saw, just a feeling of fear. Sleep experts brought in to study this found strange brain patterns in the workers, especially brain waves that usually only show up when people are in deep meditation. Some thought the mountain itself might be affecting the workers' minds, though no one could explain how. The mental toll got too big to ignore. More people missed work. Accidents went up by 23%. Several workers got a problem doctors called tunnel fugue. They would walk like zombies toward the deeper parts of the tunnels if co-workers didn't stop them. Dr. Elena Contreras, the head psychologist sent to the site in 2007, first thought it was mass hysteria made worse by working in an isolated place and being around nuclear materials. Her opinion changed after she experienced the strange things herself. "I was looking at my notes in my office when I clearly heard someone whisper my name from the air vent," she wrote. "When I stood up to check, I saw what looked like dark water coming under my door. When I opened it, the hallway was completely dry, but at the far end was a figure that looked like it was made of shadow." Contreras, who was known for being logical and doubtful, added, "I don't believe in ghosts, but I believe in facts. And the facts show that something at Yucca Mountain goes beyond what science can explain." By 2010, the Yucca Mountain project faced political fights and money problems. The official story blamed budget cuts and rock safety concerns, but secret memos leaked years later hint that the growing number of unexplained events was a big reason they decided to shut down the facility. The last incident before the project ended is the hardest to explain. On January 17, 2011, at exactly 3:33 a.m., every piece of electronic equipment in the facility failed at the same time. Backup generators turned on but worked for only 17 seconds before also failing. In the total darkness that followed, all 76 workers still inside the mountain reported hearing the whispers grow from quiet to extremely loud. Many people described feeling time stretching and feeling like they were seeing the past, present, and future all at once. Security guard Marcus Williams, who was at the main entrance tunnel, gave one of the clearest reports. "The darkness was total, deeper than any darkness I've ever seen. Then the whispers started, coming from everywhere at once. They were speaking English now, very clear, telling us we had made a mistake, that we were putting the wrong thing in the mountain." Williams added, "They said the mountain wasn't meant for our waste. It was meant to hold something else, something that was already there, something very old. And we were making the walls weaker with our tunnels." The last thing I remember before the lights came back on was one voice, louder than the rest, saying, "The doors swing both ways." When power came back on 43 minutes later, 3 workers were missing. Unlike the Baker 7 team years earlier, these people were found, knocked out in a cave no one had explored before, half a mile from where they should have been. They had no memory of how they got there. Medical tests showed nothing strange except high levels of a rare substance in their blood that usually only shows up after being near certain types of advanced physics experiments. Maybe the strangest thing was what happened to the main computer system. When tech workers got it running again, they found all the data storage wiped clean, but the system's memory now had a single file that no one had created. The file contained plans for a containment system much more advanced than anything we have now. Engineers who studied the plans said they used physics ideas that scientists hadn't even thought of yet. Even stranger were the notes in the drawings, written in perfect English but describing things that would only be needed if you had to contain time leakage or stop things coming in from other dimensions. 2 months later, on March 25, 2011, the Department of Energy announced they were closing Yucca Mountain. The official reason was technical and regulatory issues. All workers except a few were sent away, and the main tunnels were sealed with thick concrete walls. A small security team still works there, supposedly to watch the fence and keep people out, but former workers say their real job is to check the earthquake sensors still hidden throughout the mountain. Sensors that sometimes show readings that should be impossible, as if huge things are moving through solid rock. The Western Shoshone tribe has their own explanation. According to tribal members who still do cleaning ceremonies near the site, the mountain has always been a doorway between worlds. The big tunnel digging weakened this doorway, letting something start to cross over, or maybe letting something trapped inside get ready to escape. "The mountain speaks to warn us," says Shoshone elder Grace Running Water. Those who heard the whispers were being given a message meant to save us all. The question is whether anyone was really listening. What's true is that even after they closed the facility, the weird stuff didn't completely stop. People who live nearby sometimes report strange lights moving inside the mountain at night. Hikers who get too close to the fence say they lose track of time and hear faint whispers on the wind. Maybe the most telling sign is that the government won't reuse or reopen the facility even though they spent billions of dollars on it. In 2019, Congress tried to look into other uses for the Yucca Mountain complex, but the investigation was quietly dropped after the inspection team spent just 27 minutes inside the main tunnel. No one officially explained why they left so quickly, but one committee member later quit his government job entirely. When reporters asked him about what he saw, he would only say, "Some places should stay untouched. That mountain is talking and we should stop pretending we can't hear it." Scientists from the Department of Energy who still study data from Yucca Mountain have less exciting ideas. They say the special rocks might make weird fields that mess with machines and trick people's minds. Others think it's just what happens when people work underground near nuclear stuff for too long. But these ideas don't explain why hundreds of people who never met each other saw and heard the same strange things, or why real, solid proof sometimes came with these weird events. A team of independent researchers led by Dr. Sarah Whitman set up camp near the perimeter in early 2025. Using specialized equipment, they recorded sounds coming from the direction of the mountain that regular microphones couldn't detect. When the audio was processed and played back, what they heard stunned them. Rhythmic patterns that language experts identified as similar to ancient Paiute dialect, but with impossible linguistic structures, as if the language itself was evolving backward. "What we recorded shouldn't exist," Whitman stated in her preliminary findings. "It has elements of a language that hasn't been spoken in centuries, combined with mathematical patterns that suggest it's not random noise but deliberately constructed communication." People who lived near the mountain for generations have their own stories that predate the government project by hundreds of years. Thomas Running Bear, whose family has resided in the area since the 1800s, shared a story passed down by his great-grandfather. "There was a medicine man who went to the mountain to fast and pray for 7 days," he recounted. "When he returned, his hair had turned white, and he spoke of tunnels inside the mountain that led to a great chamber where the past and future existed at the same time. He warned that one day people would dig too deep and release something that should stay buried. Running Bear's great-grandfather described how the medicine man lived for many years after his experience, but would wake up screaming on the night of each full moon. He said the mountain had shown him how the world would end, not in fire or ice, but in a confusion of time where yesterday spills into tomorrow until nothing makes sense anymore. Some folks think these are just old, scary stories. But in April 2025, a woman named Lisa Torres was hiking near the mountain when she found something odd. It was a small metal disc about the size of a quarter. Strange marks were carved on both sides. When she took it home, she noticed it would spin on its own at the same time each night, 3:33 a.m. Torres tried to show the disc to local experts, but it vanished from her nightstand just 3 days after she found it. That same night, her digital alarm clock reset itself to 3:33 and wouldn't change back. She had to throw it away. One local sheriff, Rick Mendoza, has kept a secret log of weird stuff near the mountain for over 5 years. "I stopped writing down all the reports after a while," he said. "There were just too many, but the one that sticks with me happened last month." A family of 4 driving past the mountain said their car radio caught a voice that kept saying, "It's getting closer." When they looked back at the mountain, they all saw what looked like a door of light opening on the side of the ridge. When I went to check it out the next day, I found a perfect circle of dead grass right where they said the light had been. Former site boss Douglas Keller, now retired, put it best. "I've spent my life believing in science and logic, but what happened at Yucca Mountain exists in the border area between what we know and what we don't understand yet. The whispers in those tunnels might be nothing more than the human mind turning random noise into patterns, or they might be something trying to talk to us from across a gap that we're not equipped to understand." Retired physicist Dr. James Chen, who spent 3 years analyzing the data from Yucca Mountain's monitoring systems, offers perhaps the most unsettling theory. What if the whispers aren't coming from something trapped inside the mountain? He suggested in a private research paper that was quickly removed from online archives. What if they're coming from us, just not the US that exists right now? Chen's paper suggested that the mountain might sit at a point where time itself has worn thin, allowing messages to leak through from possible futures or alternate presents. The most disturbing readings always showed energy moving backward through our sensors, as if something was sending information into the past. Our past. Right now. Most scientists dismissed Chen's ideas as fringe speculation, but in February 2025, a team from MIT analyzing soil samples taken from near the mountain entrances found something that gave them pause. The samples contained microscopic particles that appeared to be aging in reverse, growing younger instead of degrading as expected. The lead researcher described it as like watching a film play backward at the atomic level before the government stepped in and classified all further findings. The tunnels of Yucca Mountain now sit mostly empty. 5 miles of main tunnels and dozens more side rooms carved into ancient rock, never used for their intended purpose. The nuclear waste that should have been stored there remains spread across temporary sites around the country, yet something is still active inside the mountain. Monitoring stations pick up strange energy patterns. Security cameras sometimes catch unexplained shadows that move in ways that break the laws of physics. And former workers still wake up from dreams of whispers, guiding them deeper into the earth towards something they can't quite remember when morning comes. One former tunnel engineer, Frank Delgado, described waking up at exactly 3:33 a.m. 3 nights in a row, his sheets soaked with sweat. "In my dream, I'm always back in the mountain," he said in a 2022 interview. But the tunnels go much deeper than we ever dug, and something is pulling me forward while whispering words I can almost understand. It's been over 10 years since I left that place, but in my dreams I never really got out. Delgado isn't alone. At least 27 former Yucca Mountain workers have reported similar dreams, all containing the same elements: deeper tunnels, persistent whispers, and a sense that something is waiting to be found. Even more strange, most of these people have never spoken to each other since leaving the project. In 2023, a secret order reportedly created a small research team with the code name Echo Protocol. Their job, according to leaked documents, is to set up parameters for communication with time-bending phenomena using equipment set up in a mobile facility near the mountain's base. No one knows what this team has found, but locals have noticed more activity around the site. Military helicopters fly over the mountain regularly. New earthquake sensors have been placed along the ridge, and at night, sensitive listening equipment can be seen pointed at the sealed tunnel entrances, as if someone is still trying to understand what the whispers are saying. Local resident Maria Vasquez has been keeping a log of strange events since 2019. Sometimes at night, you can see lights moving inside the mountain where no one should be, she said. And twice now, my cell phone has picked up weird signals, not quite voices, but not static either, like something trying to find the right frequency. In July 2024, 3 hikers who strayed too close to the perimeter fence reported losing 5 hours of time with no memory of what happened. All 3 later developed unusual marks on their inner wrists, perfect circles that glowed faintly in the dark for several days before fading. Medical experts could offer no explanation. Perhaps the most chilling account comes from Amber Lee, a truck driver who regularly passes by Yucca Mountain on her route. In March 2025, her dashboard radio suddenly cut out near the facility, replaced by a child's voice counting backwards from 10 to 1. When the counting finished, she heard what sounded like thousands of voices all speaking at once before her radio returned to normal. The weirdest part, she told a local reporter, was that when I checked my phone afterward, I had somehow received a text message from myself, from my own number, sent 3 days in the future. It just said 7 words, don't go near the mountain next week. Lee cancelled her usual route the following week. 2 days later, a massive dust storm hit the area, causing multiple vehicle accidents along the highway she would have traveled. Whatever secrets Yucca Mountain holds, they remain mostly hidden behind concrete walls and government secrecy. But the people who worked there, who walked the tunnels and heard the whispers, carry their experiences like rock samples taken from the site, pieces of something bigger and deeper than can be easily sorted or contained. As for the whispers themselves, they continue, sometimes carried on the wind, sometimes in dreams, sometimes in the static between radio stations as drivers pass the mountain on lonely desert highways, always saying something just beyond understanding, always seeming to come from somewhere just beyond our reality. A message from the mountain, waiting for someone who knows how to listen.